Hello again, welcome back to another video, and today we are looking at a scenario where Germany was punished more harshly after World War I. In our timeline, they lost a lot. They lost the Polish corridor, they lost many more lands to Poland over in their east, they lost occupation of the Saarland, a demilitarized Rhineland, no ability to unite with Austria. They lost some lands to Denmark. They were punished fairly severely. But in this timeline, they have lost way, way more. Poland has taken southern Königsberg and part of Silesia. Czechoslovakia has taken the rest of Silesia. Saxony has gotten its independence. All of Schleswig-Holstein has been given to Denmark. The Rhineland is an independent state. The Southern German Confederation between Austria, Bavaria, and Württemberg is created, and all that's left is this much smaller, far weaker North German Confederation. Whilst France directly annexes the Saarland and occupies the Rhineland. So yeah, this is a problem for multiple nations. First things first, and that is Italy. Italy would be very, very mad with this. In our timeline, they were already mad with the lands they got. And here, they have gotten even less. They've lost some lands in Austria to the South German Confederation, and some lands in Yugoslavia to Yugoslavia, just because I want to change this up a bit more than just Germany being weakened. We're going to assume absolutely nothing else changes, although, of course, many, many other things are going to change here. Without Germany, Poland might be stronger, might do better against the USSR. With this strength in Czechoslovakia, honestly, I don't even know what to say, but this would definitely be a different world. We also see Germany, who is far less prominent in Europe. First of all, they're divided, so each half is about half as strong as they would have normally been. They have lost major resources in Silesia and near the French border. Arguably the most industrialized region in Europe near the Rhineland. Multiple important northern port cities like Hamburg and Kiel. And, in our timeline, their army was restricted to 100,000. Here it is restricted to 75,000. They can have no planes. They can have no tanks. The Allies have the ability to march into Germany with their military at any time that they want to, pretty much. They are not allowed to reunify with any German states. Overall, this is about as bad as peace treaty. I don't even know if there's been a peace treaty this bad in a while. As I mentioned, nothing else changed, so Turkey still fought the Turkish War for independence and all that. But Germany is far, far weaker. I don't even know if the Nazis would take control here. So we're going to assume the North went communist and the South stayed democratic. Okay, what's the first thing that would go wrong here? Let's talk about Czechoslovakia, which is now far less Czecho and far less Slovakian. For starters, all of this land out of Slovakia is far more Hungarian than Slovakian. And all of this land out of Czechia is far more German than Czech. So yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if German was the largest language in Czechoslovakia, which has no mention of Germany. We also see that Slovakia itself also has lands that have gone to that should be Hungarian, but weren't. So yeah, despite not being able to, I think Germany would push to get back at least Silesia, possibly all of the Sudetenland. Although, first things first at this point, the communists would still want to expand. How would they do that? By annexing Saxony. Going against the treaty. The Allies would threaten the Germans, but they would not militarily intervene, at least not yet. The communists would then demand all of Schleswig-Holstein from the Danish. The Allies would tell them to back off, but the communists would invade anyway. The Allies gave them 1 week to stop the invasion of Denmark, or else they would interfere and crush Germany even further than it already has been. But Germany did not care. So they began their invasion, quickly capturing all German-speaking lands. Although at this point the 1 week was up, and despite their rapid growth, they were still not powerful enough to defeat the Allies. So they agreed to sign a compromise peace treaty in which they gain all of, I guess, southern Schleswig-Holstein, just the southernmost part of Denmark here. It's not everything they wanted, but I don't really know what they expected because there's no way that they would be able to go up against the Allies. From here, the Allied powers would begin to supply the Southern German Confederation more, as they were fully against the communists taking control, but they were not completely against the southern state, which had proved itself to be neutral and to be pro-Western. With that, they agreed to let the southern state militarize, whilst the north has to continue to militarize in secret. Let's move over to the USSR next, who would at this point be starting the Winter War between the Soviet Union and Finland. This would not be affected, at least barely at all. Much different than it was in our timeline. Perhaps Finland would actually be getting more aid from outside sources, as not everyone's caught up in the middle of a world war, and this is sooner than in our world. Or maybe around the same time. Germany cannot militarize as quickly, so they're just gonna have to wait. Either way, the USSR manages to make major progress into Finland. Although, once again, in this time, in the, let's say, 1.5 years that it's taken them to do this, possibly less, they have taken over 1 million, maybe 2 million casualties, whilst the Finns have taken less than 100,000. And the Finns are actually the ones making progress now. I thought the Soviets will offer Finland a compromise peace treaty, very, very similar to the one in our timeline. The Finns will give up all southern lands and other border territories all along the Finno-Soviet border and in the north. So yeah, overall this wasn't too devastating for Finland, but it definitely showed the weakness of the USSR. They have just lost against Finland, arguably worse than in our timeline. They technically did better in the war and gained slightly more lands, or at least they were supposed to. I don't know if I drew it in right. But anyway, they took twice as many casualties, whilst the Finns took less. This was a devastating conflict for the USSR, and it will most likely haunt them into the future. Despite that, they will still integrate all of Estonia, as Estonia wouldn't stand a chance. That's just a fact at that point. And the USSR would start to pressure against Poland together with Communist Germany, as these two would sign an alliance. Currently, this is what the alliances would look like. The USSR and Germany versus France, the UK, Southern German Confederation, the Rhineland, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and yeah, that's without factoring in these massive colonial empires. And the last one, which is actually going to be Italy, which you'd expect to be on their own, but in this timeline they get closer to Japan, as that is their only real choice. Italy is not strong enough to fight a war on their own, so they'll just try and sign some kind of agreement with Japan and hope that nobody tries to kill them. Although they will be very, very pissed, and they will most likely attack Yugoslavia. Actually, they will attack Yugoslavia, because that is extremely likely here. Italy, who is super pissed at the Yugoslavs for taking all these rightfully Italian lands, quickly push into all of Dalmatia and make a landing near Albania. They quickly capture the entire Yugoslav coast and all of northern Croatia and Slovenia. From there, they make an alliance with the Bulgarians, who begin an invasion of Macedonia and surrounding territories. Soon enough, the Yugoslavians will capitulate, and we will see a compromised peace deal take place, in which the Italians will take much of the coast, the Yugoslavians will take Macedonia and surrounding lands, and the rest will be puppeted by the Italians. Along with that, Bulgaria will fully align itself with Italy, forming up the Pact of, I don't know, just the axis of this world, which should now be between Italy, Yugoslavia, and Bulgaria. What's next on the Soviet chopping block? Well, that is Latvia, who is quickly annexed, and Lithuania, which is split between the Germans and the Soviets. The Germans getting Memel and the Soviets getting the rest. At this point, the Allies have to put their foot down, and they tell the Germans and the Soviets that if they do not stop expanding, the Allies will interfere. The Germans and the Soviets ignore these worries and jointly declare war on Poland, which is either going to be the thing that propels them to the great powers of this world or the thing that gets them killed. Next to Poland, we see the entirety of the Allies joining in. And honestly, in this timeline, Germany is insanely weaker. So I don't think they could blitzkrieg the same way they did in our timeline. They just would not have the strength for it. Frankly, they would just not have the manpower or the industry to fight a war, especially if they were still forced to militarize completely in secret. There's just no way they could have the military or industrial capacity to fight the United Kingdom, France, and southern Germany, along with the Rhineland at the same time. I'm not going to color in every territory because that would take 5 years, but that's about what the World War looks like currently. We also see Japan, who's doing their thing in China. I'm not going to map that out, but I'll let you know once that war ends in a Japanese victory, most likely. How's this going to start? Well, it's still going to start with a German invasion into Poland, which does alright, and the Soviet sledgehammer bashing its head into eastern Poland. Soon enough, all of Poland capitulates, and Germany begins to push into the Rhineland and southern German state. They manage to capture the key city of Munich and all surrounding territories in Bavaria. This is not good for the Allies, but the Allies do have one advantage. Navy. They blockade the Germans and the Soviets in all areas, and they are getting no help, no supply. The Soviets are still significantly weaker, as this is earlier than in our timeline, and the Allies are now pushing back. The Soviets are rushing divisions in to try and save their German allies, but overall Germany does lose many lands to this. An Allied naval invasion in the north, along with Germany being Germany and declaring war on Denmark, is going to cause all of northern Germany to fall, and a stalemate to be creative once the Soviets finish rushing their troops there. The Soviet army has one main issue here: their disorganization. They have recently purged all their generals, and honestly, I don't see this getting any better. The Czechs don't join immediately, but they're gonna join eventually, as the Germans in Czechoslovakia rebel. Okay, let's take a look at this. So, we have the Germans and the Soviets who are fighting the Allies. They have the help of the Sudetendeutsches, which are the German Czechs. They have taken all of Poland, but Germany is struggling. The Allies are going to continue a push into Germany, as now with Czechoslovak aid, they have a much longer front line that the Germans simply cannot hold due to a lack of manpower. So sorry, I'm pretty sure it stopped there for a minute. Oh no, it stopped, but it's going now. And the Allies capture Berlin. From here, they managed to capture most of Czechoslovakia, as the Germans would rather unify with the south than fight with the north. This is shown when a liberation of Poland is started as a campaign, and the Soviets are rushing to try and get everything under control. The Soviets, though, being the Soviets, decide why not request Bessarabia, but Romania, realizing that the Soviets are dying, is instead going to join the war, whilst Hungary joins the Italian faction. This is getting worse and worse. Germany has by this point completely fallen, and Poland is being reliberated. The Soviets are making some slight progress into northern Romania, but nowhere near enough to justify the amount of casualties. We also see Finland joining in to regain lands from the Soviets. Maybe not completely by choice, but they would join in at some point, at least start a border conflict of some sort. to regain their lost lands. Yep. Okay. So yeah, Soviet Union, this is not looking very good for them, is it? And it's only about to get worse. The Soviets soon demand that Turkey fully open up the straits and demilitarize them so that they can have access, and Turkey refuses, leading to the expansion of the war even further. This is now looking hopeless for the USSR. And by the end of the year, by about 1941, in our timeline, when the Germans attacked the Soviets are falling on all fronts. They have lost many, many lands and are actually getting pushed back in the Baltics. This is going absolutely disastrous. And with this Soviet disaster, multiple regions would be rising up in Central Asia. The people here had already tried this, but right now, with the Soviet weakness showing, they would attempt a new revolt to regain Central Asian independence. We also see in Mongolia that an anti-communist party pops up and joins the war against the Soviets. Along with this, we would see white forces, which were barely scattered in the north, rising up once again against the Soviets, and the most important of which are the democratic forces, rising up in the south near Ukraine, as Ukrainian and democratic rebels work together. This is now unwinnable for the Soviets. They're breaking up into a complete mess of rebellions and random states, and by 1943, the Soviet Union would nearly be dead. Of course, by this point, though, the Japanese, who were much less so emboldened, still hadn't declared war on the US, as they were waiting slightly longer to finish off the Chinese and interfere in the Soviet war. They directly annex all of northern China and puppet the rest, along with staging an invasion of the Soviet Union, capturing many lands in the east. They also set up a puppet in eastern Russia, using basically all of their manpower that they had just freed up to assure themselves some resources. This is also part of the reason why they didn't invade the Allies earlier. The Mongolians managed to expand their state slightly northward and set up a more neutral government. The Central Asians got their own Turkish government, which will actually unify the area. A similar thing then with India happened. They all had to work together to rise up, so they will all stay together in the future instead of breaking apart into a multitude of states that have incredibly weird borders in certain areas. This is honestly gonna change just about everything. The Allies, who have at this point fully capitulated the Soviets, are gonna have to come to some sort of agreement with the White Russians next. They've already lost all of Eastern Russia to the Japanese, and they want to make sure that no Western government is put into place. Sadly for them, they cannot stop it completely, and a White Russian government is put into place in Central Russia. Okay. So yeah, we've already got most of the land being stripped away, and a much smaller Soviet state being set up, along with a very powerful Japan in the Pacific region, who has taken down China and a part of the Eastern Soviet Union, and is now ready to declare war on the Americans and the Allies as a whole. And it might go a decent amount better for them in this timeline than in ours, but I will map that out in just a minute. First, let me finish up here in Europe. What would the new borders be like? Well, they would be very similar to before. Finland would be expanded to a far more respectable status. The Baltic states would be reset up as independent countries, with Lithuania gaining back Memel and being given a part of Latvia as the Greater Lithuanian State, since they didn't get back any lands from Poland like they did in our timeline. So this is a slightly weakened Romania. We see Latvia given independence, slightly weakened by the Lithuanians, and Estonia being given independence as well. We see Ukrainian independence being fully set up, as the Democrats had promised, as a decently powerful state. We also see Poland, who is going to take slight amounts of Ukrainian lands and Belarusian lands to set up a greater state. To make up for these lost lands, Ukraine will get some Belarusian lands. What's left, well, it's going to be divided up. Turkey will be taking a slight amount of land along the Baltic Sea and in Armenia, but nothing too extreme. Armenia will be given full independence, as will Azerbaijan, as a greater Azerbaijan will be formed. Along with that, Georgia will be given independence as a slightly altered state, and the rest will be turned into a democratic regime. As for Germany, well, Germany will be allowed to unite under the southern, regime. They'll be given all of the Rhineland, and this will be the new German state. About as powerful as in ours. They lost certain lands to France and to Czechoslovakia, but they did not lose certain lands to Poland and have gained Austria. So yeah, Germany's back on the map, and the Allies are quite happy. Poland's actually quite, would they even be that much stronger? Because they've lost many German territories, many Eastern German territories that they got in our timeline, but they have gotten all of Belarus and more of Königsberg. Would this be a stronger Poland? I would genuinely have to check that. Although I do think they would have more manpower, they may have a slightly worse industry. This new Russian state would actually be surprisingly stable, as most of the people supported this. Similar to how most of the people supported the Soviets in our timeline. And this would be a far more Western-aligned world. The Japanese would be the final threat, but they would not last forever either. In the end, they would be divided up, as the White Russians would take back many of their lands in a war against Japan. Japan would be stupid enough to declare war on the US. Despite their victories, they wanted more, and they just had to declare war on the most powerful country in the world. Although in this world, the US would be slightly weakened. The reason for that is that Europe did not need as much US support, was not in debt as much to the US, and the US did not have a major force against it that it could rally its allies behind. The Chinese would regain all of Inner and actually a larger Manchuria, since the Russians didn't gain back all of their territories. We would also see a united Korea under American dominance. And Japan would actually be split into an American and a British occupation zone, as these two are not as good of allies as they were in our timeline. Although the Americans did still do the majority of the work in Asia. So yeah, this is what the world looks like now. All of this just because Germany was divided up differently than in our world. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.